Welcome back, everyone, to the new movie franchise ranking video here on Max Talks Movies. My name is Max Dinenberg. Today, we're breaking down all 9 Conjuring films with my new ranking. I did a ranking video around 2 years ago when The Conjuring 3 Devil Made Me Do It came out. Now I'm updating the ranking with the new film, Nun 2. So if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, ring the bell. I do movie reviews, TV show reviews, movie rankings, and a weekly box office breakdown show every single Monday. So please subscribe, ring the bell if you're new to the channel. Comment down below. What are your thoughts on the Conjuring franchise as a whole? Give me your ranking in the comment section down below. We'd love to have a great discussion with people down below what your thoughts are on this franchise. I respond to every single comment, so please let me know. Let's have a fun discussion. This is just my ranking, my opinion on these movies. Let me know in the comment section down below. And also, please like the video, guys. The thumbs up button down below. That's how you support this channel. So going into this ranking, again, this is one of the universes I am very much passionate about because I've seen all of these movies at the minimum of 2 times, except for The Nun 2. But I've seen all these films at least twice, most of them at least 3 times on this ranking. I love the idea of a horror cinematic universe. I watched all these films in theaters. I rewatched all of the films leading into The Conjuring Devil Made Me Do It for that video 2 years ago. I just rewatched The Nun leading into The Nun 2. So I have very clear thoughts on these movies. So let's get into my ranking of all 9 Conjuring universe movies. So starting out at number 9 for me is the first Nun film. It's still, for me, the weakest of this entire franchise. And I talked about a little bit why in my review of The Nun 2. But again, this movie is filled with a lot of interesting ideas going back 20 years before the first Conjuring film. There's some good tie-ins to the first 2 Conjuring films in this movie. Taking place in this church in Romania is very interesting. And the opening scene really does catch you right away and brings you into the movie. But it's a series of hallway scenes or scenes of characters walking down. They turn one way, there's no ghost, and then they turn back and the ghost is right behind them, or the nun's right behind them. It's kind of a rinse and repeat. And the big reason why this movie is at this number is that there's literally just no effort for a story here. We have a nun, Sister Irene, who is not even taking her full prayers as a nun, Father Burke, and you also have Maurice or Frenchie, but they're just kind of random people who are thrown into the situation. Again, Father Burke, his only thing going for a story is the Vatican hired him and he had an exorcist a couple years ago and it did not work. That's his story. Sister Irene's story is that she hasn't completed her prayers to be a real nun. And Frenchie is just someone who's from France who lives in wherever this movie takes, Latvia, I think, or whatever this movie takes place. And he is the person who found the nun who killed herself in the opening scene. There's just no story. There's no stakes because you just don't care about any of the characters involved in the movie. I do think it's distracting sometimes seeing, and it's not a knock on Thaisa Farmiga, who's a really solid actress, but it is kind of odd to see the younger sister of the real life Vera Farmiga, who's a staple for this franchise, playing a different role in a different time period. It is a bit off for me in both films. I like her a lot as an actress, but it is a bit off with the casting of this movie. So overall, that's why The Nun comes in at number 9. I'm going to be short and sweet as we have 9 movies to talk about. At number 8 for me is the first Annabelle film, the second film of this franchise and the first spin-off movie of the main Conjuring franchises. Again, after the first Conjuring, it was all about, can we get an Annabelle movie now after that cold open to the first Conjuring? And this is one of the most dullest, forgettable films of this franchise because you don't care, again, about any of the characters. Now, this movie, for me, does make a better effort trying to at least have a story going on than The Nun does, trying to get a story to go. There are some cool enough horror scenes going on with Annabelle the doll itself, but it's a pretty just bad movie. Characters make really stupid decisions, including this married couple played by Annabelle Wallis and Ward Horton. You just don't care about their characters at all. The only character you care about is really Alfre Woodard's character of Evelyn, who gets really brought into the midway point of the movie. And even her, she's easily a very generic character to have in a horror film. It's a film that I just never would like to go rewatch. I've seen it twice now, and I just hopefully don't plan on watching it much more. It's just a film that's so bland, drab. There's not a sense of hopefulness. And when you're coming back and forth between the Conjuring universe, the Conjuring 1 into this one, again, the Conjuring 1, we'll talk about how much I like that movie, but it has some hopefulness brought into a horror movie. And this movie is so dark and too dark for its own good. It doesn't even have characters that are hopeful they can get out of a situation. So for me, Annabelle comes in at number 8. Coming in number 7 is a film that people and the producers and the director of this movie, Michael Chavis, do not want to believe it's in a Conjuring universe, but it clearly is, with The Curse of La Llorona. I said this on my ranking video 2 years ago. But if you're watching this film in preparation for this video 2 years ago, even HBO Max at the time had this not on the Conjuring watch list. If you go like the Conjuring mix on Max right now, this movie's not even on there. The producers don't want to say it is. The director doesn't want to say it's a part of the universe, but it clearly is. Father Perez returns from Annabelle. There are shots of Annabelle in this movie. It's clearly in the universe. I don't know why they complain about it. Other than that, this movie is probably the most, as I said, the most forgettable film on this list. It's a shame because I'm such a big fan of Linda Cardellini as an actress. Raymond Cruz is really good in this movie and makes this movie a lot more watchable than it is. But it's still a pretty stereotypical bad horror film for me. The beginning and this opening scene in Mexico, I really like. And this movie should have been in Mexico from the start. It's a Mexican folktale, and they should have had a Mexican story involved, Hispanic story going on in the movie. But we follow this white family in generic Los Angeles. That Hispanic thing kind of gets brought through with Raymond Cruz, but it's not a thing that's overflowing with the movie. I think it should have been in a movie called Curse of La Llorona, a Mexican folktale. The actors are doing the best they can, but it's overall a very forgettable film. I've seen it twice. I still don't remember half the stuff that happens in this movie. So overall, Curse of La Llorona comes in at number 7. Coming up at number 6 for me is the ending of at least the Annabelle trilogy, Annabelle Comes Home. On paper, this has a lot of good ideas going for it. Judy Warren being the main character and having kind of an Annabelle haunted house movie inside the Warrens' house with all of their different relics that they've collected over the movies in one place. Perfect idea to do this movie, but the execution is not that great. And when the Warrens are on screen, meaning this is the only spin-off movie to actually have physically new scenes for Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as the Warrens, that part of the movie makes it a lot more watchable than the bottom 3 movies on this list. But the biggest problem with the movie is that the only real story and hook going on with the film is with the character of Daniela, Daniela, and it's all about how she drove a car that led to her father's death, and she's responsible for that, and her dad keeps popping up in this haunted house, but she's such an unlikable character through the first 2/3 of the movie, and then when they tell us why she's being this and why she's reacting to this, it's kind of too late. That character is one of the most unlikable characters of this entire franchise. Just was not a big fan of her, and I felt bad for the actress because it's the writing which causes that character not to be great. I usually like Madison Iseman, but she's kind of just in a forgettable babysitter type role. It's a very generic haunted house movie, especially because we use the same hallway for like 3 or 4 different jump scare scenes. It just feels like rinse and repeat. And usually in horror films, you have to be creative when you use one location in a house for the entire film. But it felt like the writers, like halfway through, just ran out of ideas and kept doing the same jump scare sequence over and over again. So Annabelle Comes Home, not a good movie, comes in at number 6. Going to the top 5 for the Conjuring franchise is the newest film, The Nun 2. I'm not going to get into spoilers for The Nun 2 on this ranking for a lot of people who haven't seen it and just wanted to see where it fits on the ranking before they go see the movie. I totally understand that. I think The Nun 2 probably more than most people. It's not a great movie. It's kind of an okay movie for me, but it's a far improvement over the first film 5 years ago. There at least is a huge effort to make a story here. There's some good things talked about not being fully aligned with their religion. This is some of the best kills of the entire franchise. An excellent, iconic scene, I think, for the franchise with this magazine reveal of Valak in this movie, which is jaw-dropping and it's very good in the film. I also think the toughest performance and the guy who executes the most in the performance is Jonas Bloquet, as returning as Maurice from the first film, having to be both the person who is a genuinely good person who wants to help out this family, but also is a vessel for Valak, and not knowing that he has to perform a lot of good things, and he makes the movie watchable because he's such a likable guy. And obviously, if you know the first Conjuring film, you know he makes it through or might make it through the movie, but it's still a lot of tension and stakes are there with that particular character. But overall, there's still a lot of missteps. Overall, the story itself is not that great. There are some logic leaps made by Sister Irene on events that happen in the third act of the movie that just don't make a lot of sense, how she can make these logic leaps in the film. There's also times where this movie tries to be a murder mystery, but because I have seen the last movie, the twist of the movie I knew about before I even walked into the watch The Nun 2. I think if they went for a different type of murder mystery or didn't reveal that Maurice was the vessel in the previous film, this could have been a really genius movie from a murder mystery point of view. But because we already know before we sat down watching this movie that Maurice is the vessel for Valak, the murder mystery, that we're so far ahead of the characters, it does tend to be annoying. And I don't need every twist to be a mind-blowing twist, but to be before the movie starts, they think, I guess I forgot what happened in the last movie. I don't know. It's just not a big fan of that. As we move into the top four, these are the four really only really good to great movies of this franchise, in my opinion. At number 4 for me is easily the best spinoff movie that we've gotten, which is Annabelle Creation, directed by David F. Sandberg, who went on to do the Shazam movies for DC. This is an excellent spinoff film for Annabelle. It is a prequel, not just to the Conjuring films, but also the first Annabelle movie. And this is the best, for me, child acting we've gotten in this entire franchise. It's scary, it's terrifying, and because kids are the main characters of the movie, there's so much more tension, and things happen to kids in this movie that you really won't see in any movie you'll ever see in your life. There are some nasty things to happen to kids, and it makes the movie just so much more intense. You have Janice. You have a lot of different kids in this movie that are just at the center point, of this film, which makes it just so good, in my opinion. It's really well helmed at the helm by David F. Sandberg, who just does an excellent job. And as I said, great child performances in Lulu Wilson, as you see on screen, as Linda, and Janice, who's one of my favorite performances of this franchise, played by Talitha Elena Bateman, who does such a good job. Obviously, they're kids. There's a lot of innocence that comes with that, but their performances make them even more innocent and heartbreaking when things turn out in the third act. There's a really good tie-in that makes the first Annabelle somewhat logical in the opening scene of that movie, which really is a good tie-in from Annabelle Creation into the first Annabelle film that they do, with a really good twist in the third act of the movie. But this is the most terrifying the doll has ever been. And I feel like we haven't come close to as touching the really good movie that this film is for any of the spin-off films. Coming at number 3 now, as we're headed to the top 3 on my list, we're just down to the main Conjuring films, and let's start with The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. Now, for me, this, again, another movie that I like a lot more than most people. I think a lot of people, and that is true, it's definitely not on the same level as the first 2 Conjuring films. And obviously, you can tell James Wan is not behind the camera for this film, but I think the best part about this movie is that they go full on with this great romance and love story that is Diane, with Lorraine and Ed Warren, played by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. It's the heart and soul of this movie. It's a really interesting true story case about this guy named Arnie Johnson, who was the first person in the entire history of courts here in the United States to say that he killed someone due to demonic possession. And that's a great idea for a Conjuring movie, especially because the Warrens were actually part of the investigation team that did this in real life. I think the real story of this really makes this movie a lot better. But I said the love story really comes through between Ed and Lorraine Warren. There's a really good use of some jump scares. And finally, a human type villain in this movie. We see all the good side of the humans who go after these investigations. We're seeing another human be a villain. I thought was very interesting. But yes, it's definitely missing those James Wan directive flair. There aren't a lot of just scary scenes. Kind of all of the would-be scary scenes we kind of all saw in the trailers leading into this movie, which was disappointing. But for me, Conjuring the Devil Made Me Do, it's still an excellent film, comes in number 3. But now we have some of my favorite horror films of all time. Number 2, we have The Conjuring 2. This every day I kind of change my mind on if I like Conjuring 2 or Conjuring better, but 80% of the time I do stick with Conjuring 2 at number 2 and Conjuring 1 at 1. For me, Conjuring 2 is the scariest film of this franchise, and it really comes with one of my favorite horror scenes of all time. This scene behind me of Valak versus Lorraine, when Lorraine sees her in the hallway, and then she walks in the picture, becomes the actual Valak. It's a terrifying scene. It's the scariest scene of the entire franchise. We also get a really good reversal on the first film. In the first film, it was Ed who sensed that Lorraine might not make it out of the movie. And this time, Lorraine has a clear vision of Ed dying in this movie. And it brings so much more stakes into the film. Again, excellent child performances. The story itself, also about how the Warrens are perceived by the general public, and the fact that they even get let off the case 75% of the way through the movie, and then they get brought back on as more haunting things happen. The way that, as I said, the public perceives the Warrens is a really interesting idea. The direction, it's so confident from James Wan. As I said, it's by far the scariest film of the franchise. We get to see a lot of different creatures, which I really enjoyed. I just adore The Conjuring 2. I mean, watch both these films often, and I just really do adore The Conjuring 2. But coming in number 1 is for me, best film of this franchise, which is the very first Conjuring. All the way back now, 2013, the beginning of this 10-year horror cinematic universe. James Wan did kind of a simple haunted house story, but adds in a true story flair of the Warrens being real people investigating a real case, but Wan adds that supernatural element to the movie. Likable leads in Ed and Lorraine Warren, who really aren't the central focus of this movie. This is the most supporting characters they are of the trilogy. And that's where we get this great family dynamic of Lily Taylor and Ron Livingston being these parents, and then great child performances of actors who have done some really big things out since The Conjuring, with Joey King and Mackenzie Foy added into the mix as well. It's a very terrifying movie. It's one of the best haunted house movies you'll probably see, and it involves it feels like, again, the biggest reason why the Conjuring trilogy and really the first 2 movies work is that the kids, the family, and the Warrens feel like genuinely real people. They feel like human beings, not movie stars, not movie characters, real people. Now, yes, they can base a lot of this on real people, of course, as this film is loosely, of course, based on a true story. But the Warrens and the performances with the writing and the direction, they make these people feel like real people who are in genuine danger. And that's where the movie really comes through. In horror movies, it's great when your characters just feel like normal people, not movie stars in situations. And I do feel like because you feel that in this movie, the intensity is there, the stakes are high. The reveal scene of the character being hung right next to Lorraine, learning of Lorraine's powers, Ed's sensing of Lorraine's death in this movie. There's so many great elements. So for me, The Conjuring 1 comes in at number 1. What is your ranking of the Conjuring franchise? Let me know in the comment section down below. Like the video, subscribe, ring the bell, and I'll see you guys soon.